This is probably the greatest race hate crime in British history. We are talking about thousands, possibly tens of thousands of girls who have suffered horrendous abuse over a period of decades and, when they went for help, have primarily been let down.
This is a national issue. They're interconnected gangs. Girls are being trafficked between networks of Asian men in different cities, and it's something you really only see when you have multiple transcripts of all the case information sort of set out in front of you.
It is very important this inquiry is nationwide, but also, which is something that I'm worrying we're starting to see in how it's being talked about in West Yorkshire, it has to be specific to this particular phenomenon of groups of Muslim, predominantly Pakistani and Pakistani heritage men rounding up and sexually torturing mostly young girls and some boys. If we make it more generically about child sex abuse, about child sex exploitation, then we know how difficult it is to get the system to look head on at this problem. Not a single person, no official, no police officer, no counsellor has ever been prosecuted for covering up these crimes. And the systematic cover-up that it has taken to hide tens of thousands of victims and perpetrators is almost unimaginable. The idea that this could be nobody's fault, that nobody bears criminal liability for this, is utterly beyond credibility.
The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, in his speech at Labour conference last week, drew a comparison between the grooming gang scandal and other atrocities in our country. He spoke about Hillsborough, and he spoke about Grenfell, and he spoke about the grooming gangs, and he said, in all of these cases, justice was not done because the victims were black, because they were women and girls, and because they were working class. There's something he missed out there, which is very critical. He didn't speak about the real reason why this had been ignored for so long. It's because the perpetrators, in many of these cases, are overwhelmingly of South Asian and in particular Pakistani Mirpuri heritage.
But we get direct testimonies from care workers where they show just how complicit they were. They'll talk about going to the weddings between the children that were groomed and the groomers. They'll say that at the time they thought it was good. They had a more mature boyfriend. You'll also hear from police that actively said, oh, I lost my case notes, so I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't go back to get an interview. And you'll also hear testimonies from family members. You'll hear the mothers who aren't prosecuted, or the brothers or the uncles who give evidence, say, oh, they're a good boy, they wouldn't do this, even when victims have testified and said that the mum was completely aware. She was in the house at the time that the rapes were going on. I think rightfully people think that there's a massive amount of sort of conspiracy and cover-up in the grooming gangs, and they're absolutely right. One of the worst, most egregious things we had was one judge looked at our application and said because grooming gangs were in the news again, it was not in the public interest for anyone to have this transcript.
John Peacock said that in a 3-month period when he was observing a children's care home and he saw this pattern of abuse that we've seen replicated in over 50 different towns and cities across the country of Pakistani men taking children away from a social care home and taking them away for the purposes of sexual abuse. When he saw that going on, he gathered all this information. I've spoken to other sources who work with him, very reliable and compelling people. He brought this information to the police and social services, and they threatened to arrest him.
The people who knew, the people who let this happen, the people who built cultures so afraid of being called racist that they let children pay this unspeakable price, they belong in prison.
To show the links between Class A drugs, in particular heroin, and the abuse networks, that the men who deal in that drug also use it as a tool to groom and hook the girls as part of their access. The links also with gun crime and how these men, as organised criminal gangs, have gun running and access to tools of serious violence at all times in many cases. And also to show, and this is going to be a clear example of what Katie was referring to there, the nervousness to talk about how they are interconnected, not by criminality, but by blood and by an ethno-religious sense of connectedness. That they are linked by religion, of course, but really by blood, that these are cousins in many cases, looking out for one another, raping alongside one another, and most critically, and this is still to come, it's been hinted at in a few cases in the past, that those overlaps in familial links don't just happen in the gangs, they happen between gangs and the authorities as well. Give an example of that. Sagir Hussain, when he raped one girl for the first time outside a Boots convenience store in Rotherham, most rapists tell their victims not to make noise. He told her to scream so that his friends would notice and come and watch.